All right, I'm here with a Jeep 4.0 liter engine today. And what I'm going to investigate is oil seeping from the head gasket. And if you think about the oil flow through this head, it's kind of hard to envision how this is even possible. So when I say it's hard to believe that the head gasket is leaking oil, that's because there's no pressurized oil up here in the head. So we're talking about a leak from this void area in the cast iron through this where the head gasket would be, and then coming out and coming down the block. Okay, oil under pressure is traveling up this push rod, and that ball on the tip of this push rod rides in this cup right here on the rocker. So that pressurized oil enters this cup in the rocker, and through that little hole right there sprays out into the head, into our rocker cover, and lubricates all the moving parts up here. So once that spray of oil returns to the head galley right here, it's no longer under pressure. It's gravity that returns the oil to the crankcase. And the oil returns through this opening in the head back to the block. So it's hard to imagine that oil that's no longer under pressure, gravity's flowing it back down into the crankcase, is somehow leaking past the head gasket here. Okay, here's a look at our 4.0 engine block. And it's through this opening that oil from the head returns to the crankcase. So the leak we're talking about is an oil flow that somehow gets through this cast iron and then seeps down the side of the engine block. When this happens, it's usually in this area right here between cylinder 2 and 3. And there's down into our block through the galley. And that pressurized oil coming up the push rod is originating in the lifters right there. Okay, I haven't even considered looking for a leak such as this. But sure enough, there it is. And there's the oil seep. Between engine cylinder 2 and 3. Okay, this particular 4.0, it's a 1995. It's got over 300,000 miles on it. Being a 95, the head is a 7120. And sure enough, between cylinder 2 and 3, there's a little oil seep there. Where I'm going with this is I would have never even considered that that's a problem. But guys that are proud of their strokers, I understand. You don't want that seeping out. Okay, before you go changing your head gasket for an oil seep, make sure first off that your rocker cover gasket isn't leaking oil. That's probably the most probable cause of this. You can see on this head oil, and that's a leak from this rocker cover gasket. So your troubleshooting step is going to be to clean this side of the head up. Operate the vehicle and then come back and look again. There's no oil up here on the head and it's only down here on the block. You've essentially eliminated a rocker cover gasket leak. But most likely, if you got oil over here like this, rocker cover gasket. Okay, the oil seep that we're troubleshooting usually occurs between cylinder 2 and cylinder 3 in this area on the block. So you can see how a leak from the rocker cover gasket coming down could deceive you and you think it's a head gasket seeping oil. Okay, another potential cause of the oil over here is our distributor lubrication. So the distributor is going to have a gasket under here, and this rotating part gets pressurized oil. In this scenario, your gasket has failed, oil's leaking past that, and in operation somehow it's getting up here on the side of your engine block. Okay, another possible location of the oil getting up there on the side of your block is your oil filter mount. So the oil entering that filter is definitely under pressure. If it failed somehow, it's possible it's spraying oil up here. But you should be able to eliminate that by cleaning the oil and then inspecting it after it's in use for a while. I don't know if I'd even consider that. For the oil to get from the oil filter mount all the way up here and then just look like a seep from the head gasket, that's kind of stretching it, isn't it? Okay, let's take a good look at this head gasket and try to figure out what causes the engine oil to seep from the head gasket. And let me orientate myself here. The seep occurs in this area, cylinder 2 and 3, and down your block you have oil. So this oil seep from the head gasket's not a myth. There's indications of that on this block. And I've talked to people that have actually fixed this, so it's a real occurrence. So we'll take a good look at this head gasket and see what could be causing this. So the first thing we notice about the head gasket is these areas of material are nothing more than supports for this. See that? This is all just an open area in here. But these are required when this is manufactured so that this part of the head gasket gets orientated correctly when the head gets torqued down. So it's still very hard for me to believe that oil is seeping through the split line between the head and the engine block. These crown bolts get torqued to 110 foot-pounds, except number 11 right here, and that's a whole other topic. But it happens. All right, the crown bolt torque, the final torque, is 110 foot-pounds. And on the crown bolts out here, it's starting to make sense to me what is going on. You're applying torque here, but out here at the edge of the head, and here's where our seep occurs, that torque of 110 foot-pounds isn't felt out here if the head and the deck of the block are not perfectly flat. Okay, we'll look at the block now. A torque of 110 foot-pounds here is not going to be felt out here on this edge. As 110. The bolts on this side much closer to the edge of the block. See that? In here where they're orientated Not so much to the edge, is it? Okay, so our observation is that the crown bolt torque of 110 is designed to keep combustion gases in the combustion chamber. Whoever designed this is not worrying about an oil leak out here at this edge. The engineer that designed this is just gravity-fed oil through here. So these bolt holes are orientated in this head to concentrate on the combustion chamber pressure. Okay, my suspicion is the engines that have this Seep probably had an overheat. And that caused the flatness of either the head or the block to deviate. And that's allowing the Seep. Okay, top. So this head gasket is sitting like this. Okay, let's look at this galley cavity in the block again. And remember, this is just a big open area in the cast iron. Nothing's getting sealed. Those spacers in the head gasket are just to orientate the gasket edge. Okay, so this part of the head gasket orientates this edge, but it remains. Top. So what I'm getting at with this is any oil returning under gravity flow back into the crankcase has to transition past this gasket. Okay, so here's 2 and 3. Here's our gasket. Our gasket is 0.825 of an inch. Approximately. But look at the cast iron in our head. 0.3. So what's happening to any oil that's trying to return from the head back to the crankcase? Let's make sure we're orientated right. Top. .85, 0.38. See this area right here? Any oil coming back is just going to be obstructed by this piece of gasket. and it just sitting there, it's gonna perhaps be allowed to permeate through this seal. So any oil getting through here is not going to be a leak. It's just gravity bringing that oil back. But some of that oil is going to get stuck right here in this gasket material, and it's going to sit there. And when this engine's in operation, heating up and cooling down, and it maybe had an overheat or two at this stage of its life, and this is not perfectly level, or perhaps the engine block, and the fact that the crown bolts are orientated to contain combustion gas and pressure, the engineer wasn't real worried about out here because this is unpressurized oil returning to the crankcase. Yes, it's not a myth. It is possible for oil to seep past this gasket. Okay, is it worth trying to fix this oil seep? Most likely, either the head has a deviation in the surface flatness, or the engine block has a deviation in flatness. It can probably drive around forever with that oil seep. What's it hurting besides your pride of your engine? The amount of oil that's seeping out there is minuscule. Okay, I've had this head off, this particular motor, multiple times. So this gasket is certainly not a stock gasket. And this is the latest and greatest from Felpro. Okay, my first observation on this new gasket is that they've eliminated this orange seal. It's like an RTV type material. So that's interesting because that does have thickness to it. But you'd have to have 2 layers fail, or 1 layer on the back. Either way, I'm going to use some spray copper on this new one. That'll give me some wiggle room on surface flatness of this edge right here. So there may be some indication of oil seeping right there, isn't there? It's really going to be inconclusive because, and right there's an indication perhaps of some seepage. But that would just be oil coming down the wall of the head. There's the area where we suspect oil just sits and possibly seeps. So I don't see an area along this part of the gasket where oil would build up and just sit where it could seep. But right here and right here and right there, it's possible. And then this whole area right here, but our seep that we saw was in this area. So the last possibility with this is that the oil's coming through the gasket somehow. And right here's 2 and 3 again. Okay, that's metal. So it would have to be coming through this material, which does not really appear to be very porous, does it? So I don't know if you will be able to see this. That's metal right out here. All right, I'm a believer now. There is the possibility of oil seepage on the 4.0 liter engine from the head. Even though this is unpressurized oil, it's possible that it just lays here and then permeates through. In operation, it gets hot, cools off, and you'll see the oil seeping down the side of your block. All right, that's it.